My name is Kale Shin Evaluator of the Coalition Defense Community. In 12 years of service, I have assessed 47 species seeking
Your
membership
weapons
in
are
our
futile.
alliance. 31 failed to meet our standards. Most failed because they lacked discipline. Some because they lacked courage. A few because they lacked the technological foundation necessary for modern warfare. The human sergeant standing before me on this frozen wasteland should have been rejection number 32. His name was Dmitry Volkov. He was 38 years old by human reckoning, though I would later learn that humans measured time strangely clinging to ancient solar cycles rather than standardized galactic units. His face carried the kind of scars that come from proximity to violence. Not dramatic wounds, but small marks. A line through his left eyebrow, a slight offset to his nose. Hands that moved with the practiced economy of someone who had spent years working with dangerous machinery. He wore thermal gear stained with grease and carbon residue. His breath emerged in steady clouds in the sub-zero air. And cradled in his arms with the care one might show a sleeping child was a weapon I recognized from my preliminary research files. An M2A1 Defender, heavy machine gun, kinetic propulsion system, belt-fed air-cooled, operated through gas-actuated recoil mechanisms. 123 years old, not the design, the actual weapon. This specific piece of equipment had been manufactured in 2064 CE, according to the marking stamped into its receiver. It had been refurbished 17 times. The barrel had been replaced 4 times. The firing mechanism twice. But the core assembly, the fundamental architecture of the machine, predated humanity's first contact with galactic civilization by 3 decades. Volkov caught me staring at the weapon. His eyes were gray. Storm cloud gray. The kind of gray that suggested weather incoming. Something wrong, evaluator? His voice carried a slight accent. Russian, my translation matrix informed me. A linguistic heritage from one of Earth's major continental regions. I am simply observing, I said carefully. This was diplomatic language. What I meant was, I am wondering why you brought an antique to a demonstration of military readiness. What I thought was, this will be the easiest rejection I have ever written. Volkov seemed to understand the subtext. His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like the expression of someone who had heard the same unspoken criticism many times before and had long since stopped caring. She works, he said simply. He patted the machine gun's receiver. The gesture was unconscious. Affectionate. The way humans touch things they trusted. I made a note in my evaluation tablet. Subject demonstrates attachment to obsolete equipment. Possible indicator of cultural stagnation. The proving ground stretched around us in all directions. Novaya 7 was a human colony world at the edge of what they called the frost belt. The planet's axial tilt and distance from its star created perpetual winter conditions across 60% of its surface. Snow fell in sheets hissing against my environmental suit. The temperature hovered at minus 42 degrees Celsius. My physiology required climate control to survive such conditions. My suit regulated temperature, humidity, atmospheric composition. I existed in a bubble of controlled environment, separated from the hostile world around me. Volkov wore insulated clothing and nothing more. He stood in the open air, breathing, moving, functioning. I marked another note. Humans demonstrate high tolerance for environmental extremes. Though even as I wrote it, I knew the observation was redundant. Human adaptability was well documented. Their homeworld was classified as a Class 7 death world. Gravity 0.98 standard. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to 73% of known species. Weather patterns that range from frozen wastes to superheated deserts. Predatory fauna, toxic flora, geological instability. And humans had not merely survived on Earth. They had thrived, spread, conquered their own planet before reaching for the stars. Still, knowing something intellectually and witnessing it firsthand were different experiences. I watched Volkov work. He knelt beside the machine gun which he had mounted on a reinforced tripod anchored into the frozen ground. His movements were methodical. Remove outer gloves, expose bare hands to the killing cold, inspect the feed mechanism, check the ammunition belt, test the traverse and elevation controls. All of this performed with the kind of casual precision that suggested he could do it blind. His fingers were scarred. I could see old burn marks, calluses in specific patterns, the permanent modifications that came from years of repeated action. He was humming. I almost missed it beneath the wind noise. But my audio sensors caught the pattern. A melody, simple, repetitive. My cultural database identified it as a Russian folk song. Something about birch trees and longing and roads that led home. The juxtaposition was strange. Here was a soldier preparing for combat evaluation, humming childhood songs while assembling a weapon that belonged in a museum. I did not understand humans yet, but I was beginning to suspect they were more complicated than my briefing materials suggested. Evaluator Kaelshin. I turned. Commander Iskra Vess approached across the snow. She was 45 years old, tall for a human female standing roughly 1.7 meters, dark skin, close-cropped hair showing gray at the temples. She wore a military uniform with rank insignia. I had memorized 3 chevrons, crossed rifles, a small emblem representing Earth's United Colonial Defense Force. Her posture was military straight despite the cold. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, taking my measure even as I took hers. Commander Vess, I acknowledged, I am ready to begin the evaluation protocol. Of course. She glanced toward Volkov, who had finished his inspection and was now seated behind the machine gun eyes, scanning the empty proving ground with the patience of someone accustomed to waiting. But first, I think we should discuss the full context of today's exercise. Context, an interesting word choice. Vess gestured toward a heated shelter at the edge of the proving ground. I followed. Inside, thermal units hummed quietly. The temperature rose to something my species would consider comfortable. Vess poured herself a dark liquid from a thermal container. Coffee, my database identified, a stimulant beverage derived from processed plant seeds. The scenario is simple, Vess began. Your coalition forces will attempt to breach our defensive position. Sergeant Volkov and his squad will hold the line. Standard tactical evaluation. I have reviewed the parameters, I said. However, I must note that your choice of equipment is unconventional. Vess smiled. It was a controlled expression. Professional, but I detected something underneath. Pride, perhaps. The M2A1 has been in continuous service for 123 years, she said. Do you know why I waited? Because it works. Sandstorms, vacuum, electromagnetic interference, radiation zones, temperatures from -80 to +60 Celsius. The M2A1 functions in conditions that disable energy weapons. It requires no advanced targeting systems, no power cells, no calibration matrices. She leaned forward slightly. It requires only 3 things, evaluator: ammunition, maintenance, and a soldier who knows how to use it. Before I could respond, her communication device chirped. She listened for a moment. Her expression did not change, but something in her posture shifted. Tension. Understood, she said quietly into the device. Then to me, evaluator, there is something else you should know. This evaluation is not merely a demonstration. She pulled up a holographic display. It showed a map of the region. A red dot marked our position. A blue cluster far to the south represented an underground civilian colony. Between them, a thin green line traced an evacuation route. 280 kilometers south of this position, we have an underground civilian colony, population 80,000. Yesterday, seismic activity compromised their primary habitat dome. We began evacuating them through emergency tunnels 2 hours before your arrival. Her eyes met mine directly. The evacuation convoy departed at 0600 hours. They have 4 more hours of travel through the emergency tunnels before reaching the secondary spaceport. If we fail this evaluation before they board the transports, the coalition will not provide emergency support. No relief ships, no medical aid, no evacuation assistance. The mathematics crystallized in my mind. 2 hours already elapsed, 4 hours remaining, 6 hours total for complete evacuation. Those 80,000 people, Vess continued, will survive or die based entirely on what happens here today. She looked at me directly. Sergeant Volkov volunteered for this assignment, knowing the stakes. His wife died during first contact with the hegemony. Raiders hit their settlement before your coalition arrived to establish diplomatic relations. He has a daughter, Anya, 12 years old. She is in that evacuation convoy right now. The information settled over me like weight. He fights knowing she is among those who depend on this evaluation's outcome. I asked. He fights because she is among them, Vess corrected. Welcome to humanity, evaluator. We do not fight best when we have nothing to lose. We fight best when we have everything to lose. I followed her back outside. The wind had increased. Snow fell sideways now, reducing visibility. But I could still see Volkov's silhouette behind the machine gun. Motionless, patient, waiting. My evaluation tablet felt heavier suddenly. This was supposed to be a simple assessment. Technology review, tactical competence measurement. A formality before inevitable rejection. But Vess had reframed the stakes. And humans, I was learning, excelled at reframing. A new figure arrived on the proving ground as I returned to my observation post. PFC Rylan Torres. 22 years old, engineering specialist. He carried a heavy pack of equipment and was already talking before he reached us. Evaluator, fantastic to meet you. I have so many questions. Your plasma rifle, the one your guards carry, what's the ionization chamber? Refresh rate, and the magnetic bottle containment, is that quantum locked? Or does it use traditional field harmonics? Because I have been reading about coalition weapon systems, and the technical specifications are amazing, but also kind of vague on the core mechanisms, and I was wondering if, Torres Volkov said quietly. The young soldier stopped mid-sentence, grinned sheepishly. Right, sorry. I get excited about tech. Volkov shook his head slightly, but there was fondness in the gesture. The relationship between them was clear. Mentor and student, veteran and recruit. Torres began unpacking equipment, ammunition boxes, spare barrels, maintenance tools. He worked quickly, efficiently, talking the entire time about gas-actuated recoil operations and tolerance specifications, and reliability versus precision. I found myself charmed despite my intention to remain professionally detached. Torres represented something I had seen in other species. Enthusiasm, the joy of discovery, the desire to understand how things worked. But combined with human energy, it became something else, something relentless. The proving ground fell silent suddenly. Torres stopped talking. Volkov straightened slightly behind the gun. Vest checked her tactical display and nodded once. They had arrived. My coalition assessment team materialized from the snow, like ghosts becoming solid. 3 hover gunships descended vertically repulsor fields, creating circular zones of compressed snow. 25 infantry units deployed in precise formation. And at their center, moving with the mechanical grace of a predator who had never known defeat, walked Legate Varix. He stood 2.6 meters tall. His armor was ceremonial as much as functional, polished plates that reflected the pale sunlight etched with script in a language older than human civilization. His face was hidden behind a helmet that displayed tactical information directly to his visual cortex. Varix was hegemony, the same species that had killed Volkov's wife. I had not known this when I requested him for the assessment team. I knew it now, and I wondered if Vess had known when she accepted my request. If this too was a test. Varix surveyed the proving ground with visible disdain. His voice when he spoke carried through external speakers with perfect clarity despite the wind. So this is humanity's finest? He approached within 50 meters of Volkov's position. His shield shimmered faintly, a translucent barrier that could deflect energy, weapons, kinetic projectiles, even shrapnel from explosive devices. Commander Vess, Varix said formally, I am informed this is a standard tactical evaluation. My forces will assault your position. You will demonstrate defensive capability. Standard rules of engagement. Standard, Vess confirmed. Excellent. Varix turned his attention to the machine gun emplacement. Even through his helmet, I could feel his focus narrow. Is that a kinetic weapon? M2A1 Defender? Torres called out helpfully. 12.7 millimeter rounds, belt-fed rate of fire between 450 and 600 rounds per minute, depending on a museum piece, Varix interrupted. He walked closer. His shields brightened slightly, responding to proximity to an unknown threat. But Varix himself showed no concern, no hesitation. This is what you bring to demonstrate military readiness, Varix asked. Kinetic propulsion mass projectiles accelerated through controlled chemical explosions. He laughed. The sound was not cruel, it was worse. It was the laughter of someone encountering something so absurd that mockery became automatic. I have seen species use such weapons, primitive cultures, pre-industrial civilizations, but never have I seen an applicant to the coalition present them as current military technology. He gestured toward Volkov directly. You, Sergeant, do you understand that your weapon is obsolete? That energy-based systems surpassed kinetic warfare 300 years ago? That continuing to use such methods is nostalgic at best. Volkov said nothing. His hands rested on the machine gun's grips. His expression was calm, not angry, not defensive, just present. Varix seemed to interpret the silence as fear, or perhaps stupidity. He stepped closer still. I will offer you a courtesy, he said, a handicap, if you will, to make this evaluation less embarrassing. He spread his arms wide. Shields flared brighter. I will stand here, within optimal range of your weapon. My shields will remain active at standard defensive strength, and you will fire upon me, demonstrate the effectiveness of your museum piece. My communication device vibrated. Private channel. My superior officer. Evaluator, this is exactly what we wanted. Provoke the humans. Measure psychological response to mockery. Continue observation. I acknowledged the transmission, but something felt wrong. Varric's theatrical cruelty was deliberate, part of my protocol. Test human psychological resilience under insult. I had written the protocol myself. I was beginning to regret it. Volkov looked at Vess. She nodded once. Then he did something I did not expect. He opened a small metal box attached to the gun mount. Inside, protected from the elements, was a photograph, printed on actual physical paper, not displayed on a screen. The image showed a young girl with dark hair and gray eyes. She was holding a miniature model of an M2A1 machine gun, grinning at the camera. Volkov's daughter, Anya. He looked at the photo for exactly 3 seconds. Then he closed the box. His hands settled onto the grips with the kind of certainty that came from 10,000 hours of practice. "Ready," he said quietly. Varrix laughed again. "Whenever you," Volkov fired. The sound was not what I expected. I had heard kinetic weapons before, during historical research, in training simulations, but hearing a recording and experiencing the actual event were separated by a gap wider than the space itself. The M2A1 did not whisper, it did not hum, with the elegant efficiency of energy weapons. It roared, a deep, brutal physical sound that bypassed my audio sensors and hit directly in my chest. Shockwaves traveled through air and ground simultaneously. The muzzle flash bloomed gold and white, bright enough to trigger my visor's automatic dimming protocols. Brass casings ejected in a glittering arc, tumbling through the snow, landing with soft hisses as hot metal met frozen water. The gun shook. I could see it vibrate with barely contained violence. And Volkov absorbed that violence. His entire body became a shock absorber. Shoulders taking recoil, core muscles stabilizing. Legs braced against forces that would have knocked an unprepared person backward. He did not look like he was fighting the weapon. He looked like he was dancing with it. The bullets crossed the distance in milliseconds. My sensors tracked them automatically. 12.7mm rounds, full metal jacket, 50 grams of mass each, traveling at 890 meters per second. Simple mathematics. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. 19,845 joules per bullet. Varrix's shields reacted. Defensive algorithms activated, analyzing the threat, calculating deflection angles, distributing impact force across the entire barrier surface. The first round struck dead center of his chest. The shield flared, held. The second round hit 3 centimeters to the left. The shield flickered. The third, fourth, fifth rounds arrived before the shield could fully reset. Fracture lines appeared. Not visible to unaugmented eyes, but my sensors caught them. Microscopic cracks in the energy matrix, spreading like ice breaking under pressure. Varrix's expression changed. I saw it through his helmet's transparent faceplate. Surprise, then concern, then something that looked distinctly like fear. The shield shattered, not gradually, not with a slow fade as power cells depleted. It broke, catastrophically, completely. Energy that had been maintaining a defensive barrier suddenly had nowhere to go and dissipated in a flash of white light. And the remaining rounds in Volkov's burst hit armor. Varrix flew backward, actually flew. Momentum transfer was a simple physical law. Force applied to an object created movement. The bullets carried enough kinetic energy to overcome Varrix's mass and his armor's inertial dampeners. He impacted snow 20 meters from where he had been standing. His armor shrieked alerts. Damage warnings cascaded across my shared tactical display. Volkov released the trigger. The sudden silence felt louder than the gunfire had been. Steam rose from the machine gun's barrel. The weapon ticked softly as metal cooled. Volkov's breathing remained steady, controlled. He checked the feed mechanism, ensured the belt had advanced correctly, made a minor adjustment to the traverse wheel. He did not cheer, did not celebrate, did not even look particularly satisfied. He simply prepared for the next engagement. Because of course there would be a next engagement. This was just the beginning. I stared at my evaluation tablet. My hands were trembling, a physiological response I had not experienced since basic training. Every assumption I had made was wrong. Varrix stood, slowly. His armor was functional but damaged. His shields were offline. His pride was shattered more completely than any physical component. He touched his communication device. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its earlier theatrical contempt. All units, combat protocol, assess threat as severe. Around me, coalition forces shifted from training posture to actual combat readiness. Weapons powered up, shields brightened, hover gunships repositioned to flanking vectors. This was no longer an evaluation. This was war. And somewhere in an underground tunnel 280 kilometers south, 80,000 people continued their evacuation, unaware that their survival now depended on how long one man could hold a line in the snow. Volkov checked his ammunition. 300 rounds remaining in the current belt. 2 more belts in reserve. Not enough. Never enough. But he loaded the next belt anyway, because that was what humans did. They made do with what they had. And they held the line until they could not hold any longer. And sometimes that was enough. The first plasma bolt arrived 8 seconds after Vierex gave the order. It struck 15 meters to Volkov's left, superheating snow into steam, leaving a crater of glass where frozen water had flash melted and resolidified. The heat bloom registered on my sensors as a spike of thermal energy that would have incinerated unprotected human tissue. Volkov shifted the machine gun 3 degrees, fired a 6-round burst, adjusted, fired again. His face showed no fear, no anger, just concentration. The expression of someone solving a complex equation in real time. Torres scrambled beside him, feeding ammunition, calling out targets. Gunship Alpha, 11 o'clock high, infantry advancing from ridgeline, spread formation. Volkov nodded once. Traversed the weapon. The M2A1 spoke again. I had stopped thinking of the sound as noise. It had become language. A brutal, honest dialogue between cause and effect. Each burst said, I am here, I am functional, I will not yield. The coalition forces had expected easy victory, energy weapons against kinetics, shields against bare determination, superior numbers against desperate defense. They had not expected Volkov. He fought like someone who had internalized a fundamental truth: every second of resistance was a second purchase with ammunition and will. And he had both in quantities that defied calculation. A hover gunship moved to flank. Volkov tracked it, leading the target, firing where it would be rather than where it was. Rounds stitched across its shield envelope. The barrier held, but the pilot flinched, pulling up sharply. Human psychology as weapon. Make them hesitate. Make them reconsider. Make them remember that the man behind the gun had already broken their commander's shields. Evaluator. I turned. Commander Vess had joined me at the observation post. Her face was pale. Not from cold. From pain, barely contained. Commander, are you? I am functional, she said, the same word Volkov would have used. But you should know something. The radiation exposure from our last engagement with the hegemony, 3 months ago. I have perhaps 2 weeks remaining. She said it with the same tone one might use to discuss weather. I had no response adequate to such information. She continued, watching Volkov coordinate fire with his small squad. I volunteered for this assignment, knowing the timeline. Better to spend my final days buying time for 80,000 people than dying slowly in a medical facility. That is, I searched for words. Remarkably pragmatic. Vess smiled. It looked tired. Evaluator, humans do not fear death. We fear meaningless death. Give us a reason to stand, and we will stand until we cannot. Another plasma bolt impacted closer. 30 meters. Close enough that I felt the heat wash through my environmental suit's cooling systems. Volkov did not flinch. He was already firing at the gunship that had launched the bolt, walking rounds across his fuselage, forcing it to break off a tack run. Torres had deployed something from his equipment pack, a small device cobbled together from what looked like salvaged components in improvisation. What is that? I asked. Vess glanced over. Field expedient thermal decoy. Torres is creating false targets. The device activated. My sensors immediately registered a thermal signature identical to human body heat. Torres placed it 40 meters from their actual position. Then another. Then a third. Coalition targeting systems locked onto the decoys, wasted precious seconds analyzing. Recalibrating, seconds Volkov used to devastating effect. I made a note, though my hands shook. Humans weaponize ingenuity. They do not require purpose-built solutions. They create them from available materials and necessity. The battle entered its second hour. 12 soldiers had been defending the proving ground when combat began. I could see 11 now functioning in various positions. One was down, receiving medical attention behind cover. No. 10 functional combatants. A plasma bolt had found its mark. Specialist Kira Brandt, the medic, had been moving between positions when energy met flesh. Her scream cut through the sound of gunfire. Sharp. Abbreviated. The sound of someone whose nervous system had just experienced trauma beyond its capacity to process. She fell. Did not rise. Volkov heard the scream. I saw his shoulders tense. Saw his grip on the machine gun tighten until his knuckles went white. But he did not leave the weapon. Torres started to move toward Brandt. Volkov's hand shot out, gripping the younger man's shoulder with enough force that Torres winced. You stay. Volkov said, voice flat, command absolute. But Sarge, she's ammunition specialist stays with the gun. That is protocol. Torres's face showed agony, the desire to help warring with training, with discipline. Volkov made the decision for him. PFC, Dalmar Medical, to Brandt's position, Torres next belt, now. Another soldier broke from cover, sprinting toward the fallen medic. Plasma fire tracked him, but missed. He reached Brandt, began emergency treatment. Torres loaded the next ammunition belt with shaking hands. Tears froze on his face. She was teaching me field medicine, he said quietly. Last week. Said everyone should know basics. Volkov fired another burst, did not look away from his sight picture. She is being treated. That is what matters. You just left her there. I trusted Dalmar to reach her, because I trained him correctly. Volkov's voice carried no emotion, but his jaw was clenched tight enough that I could see muscle tension from 50 meters away. He had made a choice. Mission over compassion. Function over feeling. It was the correct tactical decision. It was also destroying him. I understood something then about human leadership. It was not about making easy choices. It was about making necessary choices and carrying the weight of them afterward. Volkov would remember Brandt's scream for the rest of his life, but he would not leave the gun, because 80,000 people did not care about his feelings. They cared about arriving alive at the end of their evacuation route. The third hour brought worse news. Commander Vest collapsed, not dramatically. She simply stopped standing. Her legs folded, and she sat heavily in the snow, hand pressed to her abdomen. When she pulled her hand away, it was red, internal hemorrhaging, the radiation damage manifesting as her body's repair systems failed. I called for medical assistance, but our medics were coalition personnel, and we were currently engaged in combat against the humans. The absurdity of the situation struck me with physical force. Vest looked up at me, blood at the corner of her mouth. Do not stop this, she said. Commander, you require immediate medical intervention. She coughed. I require Volkov to hold long enough for those people to reach safety. Everything else is secondary. She tried to stand, could not, settled for sitting upright. Evaluator. I need you to do something. Anything. Tell Volkov. Tell him I knew about the radiation. I knew when I volunteered. This is not his fault. None of this is his fault. I do not understand why. Because he will blame himself for my death, for Brandt's injury, for every casualty in this engagement. That is what leaders do. We carry the weight of every choice. She gripped my arm, surprisingly strong despite her condition. Tell him he made the right calls, all of them. Promise me. I promise, Omeo. She nodded, leaned back against the snow, closed her eyes. 2 weeks, the doctor said. I am glad I will not waste them in a hospital bed. Her breathing became shallow, irregular. I had witnessed death before, many times, but I had never watched someone choose their death, choose to spend their final moments purchasing time for others. Commander Iskra Vest died at hour 3 minute 47. A soldier brought Volkov the news. I watched through my observation scope, saw Volkov's face when he heard, saw something break behind his eyes, something that might have been the last piece of optimism he had carried into this battle. He did not cry, did not rage, did not stop firing. He simply nodded, acknowledged the information, kept fighting. But his hands when he reloaded the next belt were shaking. Torres saw it too, put a hand on Volkov's shoulder, said something I could not hear. Volkov shook his head, adjusted his aim, fired. The machine gun had been running for nearly 4 hours. The barrel was glowing faintly even in daylight heat distortion, creating shimmer patterns in the air above the weapon. They had changed barrels 3 times. The barrel torque assembly was showing stress. The receiver had hairline cracks forming. My chronometer showed 3 hours, 53 minutes since combat began, which meant 2 hours, 7 minutes remaining until evacuation completion. 6 full hours from when the convoy had departed. The next 20 minutes were brutal. Coalition forces sensed human weakness, pressed harder. A plasma bolt found Corporal Hendrik as he repositioned to cover Volkov's flank. The energy weapon punched through his inadequate cover and he went down without a sound. Then another coordinated strike. 2 plasma rifles firing simultaneously at overlapping targets. Private Ose and Specialist Kumar were sharing cover behind wreckage when both bolts arrived within microseconds of each other. The thermal bloom was so intense my sensors overloaded momentarily. When they reset, both soldiers were gone. Not wounded, simply gone. Vaporized to constituent atoms. 3 soldiers in 20 minutes. 12 defenders had become 10. Now 10 had become 7. 7 functional combatants remained. 7 against 25 coalition troops and 3 hover gunships. The mathematics screamed impossible. But Volkov kept firing. My superior officer contacted me via encrypted channel. Evaluator Kyalshin, status report. I pulled up my tactical display. Human forces have sustained 58% casualties. Defensive position technically indefensible for the past hour. Ammunition levels. I checked my sensors. Current belt nearly exhausted. Remaining reserves 1 full belt, 1 partial. Estimated 11% remaining. Time until evacuation completion. I consulted the shared tactical network. 117 minutes. There was silence on the channel. Then, they cannot possibly hold for another 2 hours, not with current ammunition levels and casualty rate. No, I agreed, they cannot. Then this evaluation is concluded. Order Variks to accept their surrender. I opened my mouth to relay the command. Then I stopped, because Volkov was doing something unusual. He had stopped firing, stood up from behind the gun, raised his hands above his head, but he was not surrendering, he was speaking, broadcasting on open channel so all coalition forces could hear. Legate Variks, I have a proposal. Variks's voice came back suspicious. What kind of proposal, Sergeant? Single combat, you and me, hand to hand, no weapons, no armor, no shields. Silence stretched across the proving ground. Then Variks laughed. It sounded genuinely amused. You wish to fight me personally, a human against hegemony biology. You understand I am 50% stronger than you, 40% faster. I understand, Volkov said calmly, but here are my terms. You win, we surrender immediately. No more fighting, no more casualties. Clean coalition, victory. And if you win, you give us 2 hours. Withdraw your forces. Let us hold the proving ground without contest until the evacuation is complete. I could hear the calculation in Variks's pause. He was measuring probabilities. A human challenging him to physical combat was essentially suicide. Volkov would lose. Surrender would follow. The evaluation would end. Coalition victory achieved through honorable single combat rather than continued bloodshed. It was tactically sound. I accept your terms, Sergeant. Good, Volkov said. Give me 5 minutes to prepare. He cut the channel. Torres stared at him. Sarge, what are you doing? He will destroy you. Volkov began removing his tactical vest, his weapons, everything except his base layer clothing. Buying time, he said simply, by getting yourself killed, by making him work for it. Volkov caught my eye across the proving ground, gestured for me to approach. I walked over carefully. Coalition and human forces had fallen into uneasy ceasefire. Waiting. Evaluator, Volkov said quietly. I need you to understand something. I am listening. I am not trying to win this fight. I am going to lose. Badly. But losing takes time. 15 minutes if I am smart. 20 if I am lucky. He glanced at his remaining soldiers. Torres, Brandt still unconscious but stable. The others wounded but standing. And every minute Variks spends beating me is a minute they rest. A minute they do not spend ammunition. A minute closer to those civilians reaching safety. The tactical logic was sound, horrifying but sound. There is something else, Volkov continued. While he fights me, I am going to study him. Combat patterns, reaction times, weak points. Why would you need to know his weak points if you are surrendering after you lose? Volkov smiled. It was not a happy expression. Who said anything about surrendering, Evaluator? Then I understood. This was not surrender. This was reconnaissance. Volkov intended to lose the duel, return to his position, and continue fighting with new intelligence about Variks's capabilities. He was spending his body as currency to purchase tactical advantage. That is insane, I said. Yes, Volkov agreed, but it is effective insanity. And right now, effective is all that matters. He walked out onto the open proving ground. Snow fell around him. His breath clouded the air. He looked small standing alone in that vast white expanse. Variks approached from the coalition lines. Even without armor, he was massive, tall, heavy with muscle that had evolved under higher gravity than Earth standard. They faced each other across 10 meters of snow. I respect your courage, Sergeant, Variks said, but courage without capability is simply suicide with witnesses. Maybe, Volkov said. Let's find out. Variks moved first. What followed was not a fight. It was a lesson in biological disparity. Variks was faster, stronger, more durable. His reach advantage alone made Volkov's attacks ineffective. His strikes landed with force that would have shattered human bones. Volkov lasted 17 minutes. He did this through pure defensive technique, not trying to win, just trying to not lose immediately. Dodging, blocking, absorbing impacts on muscle rather than bone, making Variks work for every hit. And studying. I watched Volkov's eyes. Even as he took punishment, he was observing, measuring, learning. Variks' left shoulder. Slight hesitation when extending that arm. Old injury incompletely healed. His footwork favored right side pivots. Predictable once you knew to look for it. His breathing pattern showed exertion at minute 12. Stamina limits. Volkov was downloading tactical data through violence and paying for it with his body. At minute 17, Variks landed a strike that lifted Volkov off his feet and sent him crashing into snow 6 meters away. Volkov did not get up immediately. Variks stood over him. Yield, you fought well, but this is finished. Volkov pushed himself to hands and knees, spit blood into the snow. Finished, he agreed. He stood, swaying but upright, walked back toward his defensive position on legs that barely supported him. Torres ran out to help. Volkov leaned on the younger man's shoulder. Did you get what you needed? Torres whispered. Yeah, Volkov said. Left shoulder, weak point. And he is slower after minute 12. They reached the gun emplacement. Volkov collapsed behind the M2A1. His face was a roadmap of bruises. His ribs were likely cracked. His left eye was swelling shut. But his hands found the gun's grips, settled into familiar position. He looked at Variks, at the coalition forces preparing to resume their assault. Then he looked at me. Evaluator. How much time left? I checked. 93 minutes until evacuation complete. Ammunition. I consulted my sensors, one full belt loaded, one partial belt remaining, perhaps 250 rounds total. 11%. Volkov nodded. Did the mathematics. Came up with an answer that should have been impossible. Then we hold for 93 minutes. Torres started to protest, stopped when he saw Volkov's expression. It was not determination, not courage, not even stubbornness. It was acceptance. Volkov had accepted that the next 93 minutes would destroy him, but he had also accepted that 80,000 people were worth being destroyed for. He chambered the first round. Resume combat. Variks called across the proving ground. The coalition forces advanced, and Volkov, broken and bleeding, began firing again. The gun roared, and something inside me, something I had not known existed, whispered, "This is what humans are. Not the strongest species, not the smartest. Not the most advanced, but the ones who do not stop, even when stopping would be mercy." 93 minutes. That was the number that defined everything that followed. 93 minutes until 80,000 civilians reached safety, until evacuation transports lifted off, until Volkov could stop holding a line that should have broken hours ago. 93 minutes measured in heartbeats and ammunition in the slow degradation of human tissue under sustained combat stress. I watched the chronometer count down. Watch Volkov fire in controlled bursts, conserving ammunition that could not be conserved enough. Watch coalition forces press their advantage, sensing weakness, smelling victory. And I watched something else, something I did not have words for yet. I watched a man refuse to accept mathematics. The M2A1 had been firing for 4 hours and 37 minutes. Metal fatigue was not a possibility. It was a certainty. The barrel was past its operational temperature threshold. The receiver was stress damaged. The feed mechanism was showing signs of imminent failure. Any moment the weapon would simply stop working, any moment, but not yet. Volkov knew this. I could see it in how he touched the gun between bursts fingers, reading vibrations like a physician reading a pulse, feeling for the moment when loyal metal would finally surrender to physics. Torres fed ammunition with hands that had gone numb from cold and adrenaline. His earlier enthusiasm had burned away. What remained was mechanical function. Load belt. Clear, jam. Load belt. Clear, jam. The rhythm of survival. Kira Brandt had regained consciousness. She should have been evacuated to medical facility. Instead, she lay behind cover, methodically distributing their remaining ammunition into equal portions. Planning for the endgame. 7 soldiers remained functional. 7 against 23 coalition troops. But the coalition forces had changed their approach. They were no longer pressing hard. They were waiting, letting time and ammunition do their work. Variks understood the mathematics as well as I did. He did not need to win gloriously. He only needed to wait for humans to run dry. 61 minutes remaining. The M2A1 coughed. Not a firing sound, a mechanical sound, something internal protesting. Volkov immediately ceased fire. His hands moved with practiced speed, inspecting, diagnosing. Barrel warp, he said flatly. Heat stress, she is done. Torres pulled the spare barrel from their supply pack. The last spare, fourth barrel change of the engagement. How long to swap? Brandt called from her position. 2 minutes, Volkov said. Maybe 3. We do not have 3 minutes, Brandt said. She was correct. Coalition forces were advancing, sensing the weapon's pause, taking advantage. Volkov looked at the warp barrel, at the spare in Torres's hands, at the advancing enemy. Made a choice. Torres, mount the spare. I will buy you time. With what weapon? Volkov's rifle lay beside the gun emplacement. Standard issue, 30 rounds in the magazine. Not enough to stop an assault, but enough to slow it. He picked it up, checked the chamber. Stay on the gun, get it operational, that is all that matters. He stood, exposed himself to enemy fire. Began engaging coalition infantry with aimed single shots. I wanted to scream at him to take cover, to preserve himself, to think strategically. But he was thinking strategically. The strategy simply involved spending himself as currency to purchase Torres the seconds needed to complete the barrel swap. Plasma fire tracked toward Volkov's position. He dropped, rolled, came up firing. Dropped again. Torres worked frantically, hands shaking, barrel torque wrench slipping. Time measured in seconds that felt like hours. Volkov's rifle clicked empty. He dropped it, drew his sidearm, kept firing. 15 rounds in the pistol magazine. He made each one count. Torres screamed, barrel seated, loading belt now. Get down! Volkov dove behind cover as concentrated plasma fire struck where he had been standing. The M2A1 roared back to life. New barrel, fresh capability, same desperate mathematics. 53 minutes remaining. My communication system activated. High command channel. Priority override. High Admiral Thesseral's voice filled my helmet. Evaluator Kaelshin, I am inbound to your location. Prepare full tactical assessment. The words were calm, professional. But I heard the subtext. Someone at the highest levels of Coalition Command was paying attention to this evaluation. I did not know if that was positive or catastrophic. The Admiral's transport descended through the snowstorm 12 minutes later. A sleek command vessel shielded against weather and weapons alike. It settled onto the proving ground at a safe distance from the combat zone. High Admiral Thesseral emerged. She was Verdani species, tall and angular with skin that shifted through subtle color variations based on emotional state. Currently, her skin showed deep blue, curiosity mixed with concern. She approached my observation post without hesitation, without fear, as if walking through an active combat zone was simply another administrative task. Report evaluator. I gestured at the tactical display. Human forces have sustained 58% casualties, ammunition at 11%, defensive position technically indefensible for the past hour. Yet they continue to hold. Yes, Admiral. Why? I looked at Volkov, at Torres, at the wounded soldiers who had refused evacuation, at the machine gun that should have failed a dozen different ways but somehow kept firing. Because they must, I said, because 80,000 people depend on it. That is emotional reasoning, not tactical. Admiral, I am beginning to suspect that for humans, there is no difference. Thesseral's skin shifted to pale green. Intrigue. She accessed my raw sensor data, watched footage of the past 5 hours compressed into 5 minutes. Watched Volkov break Vierix's shields. Watched Vest die giving orders. Watched Volkov take a beating in single combat and return to his weapon afterward. Her skin cycled through colors I had never seen her display before. Yellow surprise. Orange confusion. Finally deep purple. Respect. How long until evacuation completion? She asked. 41 minutes. How much ammunition do they have? I checked current belt status. Nearly exhausted. Partial belt remaining. Perhaps 150 rounds total. Enough for perhaps 20 minutes at current burn rate. Then the mathematics are impossible, I confirmed. They cannot hold. Thesseral watched Volkov fire another burst. Watched him adjust, compensate, optimize every single round. That soldier, she said quietly, Sergeant Volkov, he knows he cannot win. Yes. Yet he continues. Yes. Wipe I pulled up the file I had compiled, showed her Volkov's personal data. Wife killed in hegemony raid. Daughter in the evacuation convoy. 15 years of service. Specialty weapons others had abandoned as obsolete. Because winning is not the objective, Admiral. Holding until others are safe is the objective. And by that metric, he is succeeding. Thesseral's skin went white, the color of decision. I am halting this evaluation. Admiral, that is not a request, evaluator. This has gone beyond standard assessment protocols. People are dying, actual people, for a test. She activated her command channel. All coalition forces, this is High Admiral Thesral. Cease combat operations immediately. Fall back to, Volkov's voice cut across the channel. Negative, Admiral. Request you allow continuation. Thesral blinked. Sergeant, you are in no position to make requests. Nevertheless, I am making one, ma'am. The honorific was perfect military courtesy, delivered in a voice rough with pain and exhaustion. Sergeant, you have sustained severe injuries. Your weapon is on the verge of mechanical failure. Your ammunition will not last another 30 minutes. There is no logical reason to continue. Respectfully, Admiral, logic is not what holds this position. Silence stretched across the channel. Then Volkov continued quieter. Those people in the evacuation convoy, they do not know about this battle. They do not know about coalition evaluations or tactical assessments or any of this. They only know they were told to run and someone would hold the line. He fired another burst. The sound punctuated his words. I intend to be that someone until they are safe or until I cannot pull this trigger anymore, whichever comes first. Thesral's skin cycled rapidly through colors, processing, calculating. Then she did something I had never seen her do in 12 years of service. She overrode combat protocols based on emotional assessment. Coalition forces stand down, establish defensive perimeter, but do not engage unless directly fired upon. Varix's voice came back shocked. Admiral, they have not surrendered. They have not withdrawn. You are granting them victory by default. No, Legate, I am granting them something else. Observation. She cut the channel, looked at me directly. Evaluator, your preliminary assessment concluded humans were technologically inferior. Do you maintain that position? I thought about the M2A1. About a weapon older than first contact still firing when advanced systems had failed. No, Admiral, I was measuring the wrong variable. Explain. I measured technology. I should have measured reliability. The M2A1 is not inferior. It is refined, proven, every unnecessary component removed until only function remains. I pulled up comparative data. Coalition energy weapons, 94% functionality under optimal conditions, 67% under field stress, 41% in extreme environments. The M2A1, 97% functionality across all documented environmental conditions. Because it does not care about optimal conditions, it simply works. Thesral nodded slowly. Continue. But the weapon is not the critical factor, Admiral. The soldier is. Volkov has spent 5 hours making impossible decisions, sacrificing personal safety for mission success, absorbing casualties without breaking, adapting constantly despite limitations. I gestured at the tactical display. He has demonstrated every quality we claim to value in coalition forces: courage, discipline, tactical flexibility, loyalty. In one quality we have difficulty quantifying: refusal to quit even when quitting is logical. Thesral's skin shifted to gold. Agreement. She accessed her command database, pulled up classified files. Evaluator, are you familiar with the Void incursions? I was. Every coalition military officer was. The Void were an extragalactic threat, incomprehensible, implacable. They did not negotiate, did not communicate, simply consumed resources and moved on. Coalition forces had a 34% success rate against Void encounters. 66% of the time we lost. I am familiar, Admiral. 3 years ago, we embedded human military advisors with coalition units facing Void incursions. Experimental program, small sample size. She displayed the data. Coalition units with human advisors, 67% success rate, nearly double our baseline. I stared at the numbers. Why was this not made public? Because we did not understand the mechanism. Human technology is not superior to ours. Human tactics are not revolutionary. By every quantifiable metric, they should not improve our performance. Thesral's skin darkened to deep purple. But they do, because they bring something we have optimized away. The refusal to accept defeat even when defeat is logical. They look at impossible situations and simply begin problem solving. She watched Volkov fire another burst, 23 minutes of ammunition remaining by my calculations. That soldier down there, Volkov, he represents what the coalition needs. Not better weapons, better warriors. People who hold when holding is mathematically impossible. Then you are approving their application. I am doing more than that, evaluator. I am recommending humans for immediate integration at all levels of coalition military structure. My skin chromatophores shifted to shocked orange before I could control them. Admiral, that is unprecedented. We have never integrated a species so quickly. We have never faced extinction before, Thesral said bluntly. The void is winning Kaelshan. Slowly, inevitably, we lose resources faster than we gain them. At current rates, the coalition will collapse within 60 years. She looked at me directly. Unless we learn what humans know. That survival is not about having the best technology. It is about refusing to stop using whatever technology you have. 15 minutes remaining until evacuation completion. Volkov's ammunition counter, by my calculations, showed 7%. Roughly 100 rounds. Not enough. But he kept firing anyway. The mathematics had finally caught up with him. I watched him realize it, saw the calculation in his eyes. Not enough bullets. Too much time. He looked at Torres, at Brandt, at the soldiers who had held this position with him. Then he did something unexpected. He stood up from behind the gun, started walking toward coalition lines. Hands raised. Not in surrender, in challenge. Legate Varix, we need to finish our conversation. Varix emerged from his command position. Sergeant, you can barely stand. You wish to fight again. No, I wish to make you an offer. I am listening. You want to prove hegemony superiority. Prove it. Face me one more time. But understand something. I studied you during our first fight. I know your patterns now. Your weak points. Volkov gestured at his battered face, his cracked ribs. You broke my body, but I learned from it. And humans Legate learn very quickly. It was a bluff. Volkov could barely walk, let alone fight effectively. But it was a bluff delivered with such absolute conviction that Varix hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw something remarkable. Varix was afraid, not of losing a fight, but of what it would mean if he won. If he defeated this broken human who refused to stay defeated, what would that prove that the hegemony could beat a half-dead opponent? There was no honor in that victory. Varix's voice when he spoke carried a tone I had never heard from him before. Uncertainty. Sergeant Volkov, you have earned something today. He approached across the snow, stopped 3 meters away. My respect. He lowered his weapon, deactivated his combat systems. I came here believing humans were primitive, that your weapons were obsolete, that your tactics were outdated. He gestured at the proving ground, at the evidence of 5 hours of desperate defense. I was wrong. You do not use old weapons because you cannot build new ones. You use them because you understand something we have forgotten. What is that? Volkov asked. That the weapon does not matter. The will behind it matters. Varix looked at Admiral Thesral. I vote for human acceptance into the coalition. They have earned membership in blood. The Admiral's skin shifted to satisfied blue. Noted, Legate. She activated fleet-wide communication. All coalition council members, emergency session, vote on human application status. 12 voices responded across the channel, 12 species represented, 12 different perspectives. The vote took 4 minutes, each council member accessing the tactical data I had compiled, watching Volkov's 5-hour stand, seeing what one human with an obsolete weapon and unbreakable will could accomplish. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was now part of the coalition. 7 minutes later, long-range sensors detected the evacuation transports achieving orbit. 80,000 civilians safe. Volkov received the confirmation via his tactical display. Read the message twice as if unable to believe it. Then he sat down heavily in the snow, just sat. Torres dropped beside him. Brandt limped over. The other soldiers converged on Volkov's position. They did not celebrate, did not cheer, simply sat together in exhausted silence. I approached slowly. My environmental suit felt like armor suddenly, a barrier between myself and something authentic. Volkov looked up at me, one eye swollen shut, face painted with bruises. But his expression was calm. Evaluator, did we pass, Sergeant? You did not just pass, you reset the standards. I knelt in the snow beside him, picked up a spent brass casing, still warm despite the cold. I came here to evaluate your weapons, your tactics, your readiness for modern warfare. I evaluated the wrong things. I should have evaluated your character, your determination, your refusal to abandon what works simply because it is old. Volkov accepted the casing when I offered it back, looked at it like it contained answers. This gun, he said quietly, M2A1. My grandfather used its predecessor. My father trained on this exact model. I have fired it for 15 years. He met my eyes. It is not about the gun being old, evaluator. It is about trust. I trust this weapon because it has never betrayed me. Not in sandstorms, not in vacuum, not in 5 hours of continuous combat when every spec said it should fail. And the other reason, I asked, because I could see there was more. Volkov pulled out the photograph from inside his vest, his daughter, holding her model M2. Because when she asks what I did in the war, I want to tell her I used the same kind of weapon her great-grandfather used. That we are not just fighting for the future, we are honoring the past, the people who held lines before us. He tucked the photo away carefully. Humans do not give up on things that work. Tools, people, principles. We refine them, maintain them, trust them, even when newer options exist. That philosophy nearly got you killed today, I observed. Volkov smiled. It was tired, genuine. Evaluator, nearly is not the same as actually. We are all still breathing, those civilians are safe, and this old gun is still functional. I would call that a successful philosophy. 3 weeks later, I stood in the Coalition War Museum on Terminus Station. The M2A1 occupied a place of honor in the new human integration exhibit. The actual weapon from the Novaya 7 evaluation. Barrel scarred, receiver marked with carbon scoring, but cleaned, preserved, respected. The plaque read, "The last round, Sergeant Dmitry Volkov, Novaya 7 Defense. Human forces held defensive position for 5 hours 47 minutes against numerically superior coalition assessment team. Sustained 58% casualties. Expended 89% ammunition. Protected 80,000 civilian evacuees. Proof that determination and proven technology can overcome overwhelming odds. Donated by Sergeant Volkov with the inscription, 'She never let me down. I hope I never let her down either.'" I stood before the display for a long time, watching coalition soldiers from a dozen species examine the weapon, seeing them touch the plaque, reading the story, learning the lesson. Evaluator Kyelshin. I turned. Volkov stood behind me, mostly healed, still carrying some stiffness in his movements, but alive, functional. "Sergeant, I did not expect to see you here." They asked if I wanted to attend the dedication ceremony. Seemed appropriate. We stood together, looking at the gun. "Do you regret donating it?" I asked. Volkov shook his head. "I have others. And this one has a better story to tell here than it would back on my gun rack." He pointed at a group of young coalition recruits examining the display. "They need to understand, technology is not about having the newest. It is about having what you can trust." One of the recruits noticed us, recognized Volkov from the dedication ceremony, approached nervously. "Sergeant Volkov, I am sorry to interrupt, but I had a question about the battle. The ammunition. You knew you did not have enough to hold for the full evacuation time. How did you maintain morale knowing you would fail?" Volkov considered the question, then smiled. "Son, I did not know I would fail. I knew the mathematics said I should fail. But humans have a saying, and the fight is not over until you quit, and I was not going to quit. But realistically, every major human achievement was impossible until someone did it anyway. First flight, first orbit, first colony ship, all impossible, all achieved." He tapped the plaque. "We do not let mathematics tell us what is possible. We let determination show mathematics it was miscalculating." The recruit nodded slowly, walked back to his group. I turned to Volkov. "I need to tell you something. Commander Vess, before she died, she asked me to tell you something." Volkov tensed. "She said tell him I knew about the radiation. I chose this. None of it was his fault." Volkov's jaw tightened. He stared at the M2A1 display without speaking for a long moment. "Thank you," he said finally, voice rough. "She also said you made all the right calls, every single one. I left Brant screaming when she was hit. I watched Vess die without calling for medical support. I chose mission over people. You chose many people over few people. That is command." Volkov nodded, but I could see the weight still sat on him, would always sit on him. That was leadership, carrying the cost of necessary choices. I reached into my case, pulled out an envelope. "This is your official notification. The Coalition Council has approved a new position, Human Military Integration Specialist. Your role would be to embed with Coalition units, Teach them what you know. Volkov took the envelope, did not open it, Terran. Will it keep me away from my daughter? Partially, yes. Then I need to think about it. Of course, he looked at me directly. Evaluator, you said I reset the standards. What did you mean? I pulled up my final report on my tablet, showed him. New coalition evaluation metrics, added categories, persistence under impossible odds, ability to maximize limited resources, psychological resilience, loyalty to mission and personnel, capacity for improvisation. Every category weighted equally with technology assessment, because you prove that capability is not just about tools, it is about the people using them. Volkov read through the report, nodded slowly. You know what the funny thing is, evaluator? What? We were not trying to prove anything. We were just trying to hold long enough for people to get away. Everything else was incidental. And that I realized was the entire point. Humans did not perform heroics to impress observers. They performed them because the alternative was unacceptable. My final evaluation report concluded with one paragraph. Sergeant Dmitry Volkov brought a 123-year-old machine gun to demonstrate human military capability. I initially classified this as evidence of technological stagnation. I was wrong. He brought proof of a philosophy: never abandon what works, never abandon each other, never stop when you can still move forward. Legat Varric stated humans brought a monster. He was correct, but the monster was never the gun. It was Volkov's refusal to let 80,000 people die while he still drew breath. That is the human monster, and it is exactly what the coalition needs to survive. Volkov finished reading, handed the tablet back. That is very kind, but I am not a monster evaluator. I am just a soldier who did his job. Sergeant, sometimes those are the same thing. I extended my hand, human gesture. Volkov gripped it. Thank you, I said, for teaching me what I should have been evaluating. What is that spirit? It counts more than steel. Volkov smiled, released my hand, walked toward the exit. He paused at the door, looked back at the M2A11 final time. Then he was gone. I remained before the display, thinking about brass casings and stubborn men and the difference between obsolete and proven, thinking about humans who brought monsters to battles and how the galaxy was safer because those monsters refused to quit. My name is Kik Elshin. I have evaluated 47 species for coalition membership. 46 were assessed on their technology and tactics. One was assessed on their character. And I finally understood which metric mattered more. The monster was never the gun, it was the will behind it. And God help anyone who underestimated that will. Because humans do not know when they are supposed to quit. And sometimes that changes everything.